At about this time, I volunteered my helicopter for night missions. Night missions were very dangerous because it was usually one helicopter going on a mission alone. No backup or pickup if we were shot down or went down because of mechanical failure. Everyone each had to volunteer for the night mission. I was the automatic crew chief when I volunteered my helicopter for a night mission. Pilots and gunners could switch helicopters, but crew chiefs were assigned one helicopter and flew on it any time it flew. It essentially was the crew chief's private helicopter. Like my own car, my own helicopter. Danny Utinsky talked me into night missions. We from Illinois are brave, rah-rah. Ha, that wore out quick, but Danny was my door gunner on those missions, and the best ACs would also volunteer. We all had medals for valor. It took some kind of adventurous daring to go on night missions, but we thought we were the best crew to get the job done. If some people less experienced would go out there, they might get killed. Not that we wouldn't, but we figured we had a better chance of survival than some. Our first night mission was to load up on small arms ammo and water and fly to a certain faraway Special Forces camp that was under very heavy attack. Well, we loaded up and off we went to find the camp. We would have to land in the middle of the battle inside the camp. Not an easy thing to do. After about 40 minutes of flying by compass reading, we saw a battle going on in the distance. Red tracers versus green tracers with explosions going on. Mostly green and yellow tracers from outside the base. As we approached, I made the mistake of shooting at the source of the enemy tracers trying to help out. Suddenly, the enemy now directed their tracers toward us. I stopped firing. They could hear the helicopter even through the battle, but didn't know exactly where we were until I started foolishly shooting. We were above the camp, but could not visually see what the ground looked like under us, nor could we, in this surreal tracer light, know how far off the ground we were. Our altimeters were useless at under 300 feet. The pilot switched on our landing searchlight for a second to see what was under us and where we were in the air. Tracers everywhere started to shoot at us. We landed and Danny and I started to throw out the ammo and water. Then some fellows came along and threw in about 4 wounded. We flew up and out, round after round was hitting the helicopter. But we were still flying and none of us were hit by rounds. The wounded were Asian, probably ARVN troops, Army of the Republic of Vietnam, and we flew to the nearest base camp field evacuation hospital. The wounded were somewhat bandaged and one was holding his dismembered arm in his other hand. I could not see much, but tried to do what I could, which pretty much was nothing. We landed at Tay Ninh. I think the stretcher bearers came running out to get the wounded and then put them on the stretchers. Then they started to try and pull me off the helicopter, thinking that I was wounded too. I had blood all over me, but kept telling them I was not hit, which I wasn't. It was the poor wounded guy's blood. The AC actually had to get out of the helicopter and order the medics to stop grabbing me. They finally stopped. Some wounded guys do go out of their minds and start fighting the people who are trying to help them. I once had a wounded guy try to actually throw me out of the helicopter when I tried to help him. Once we were done with the mission, we could go to sleep and not fly that day with the flight. No one slept long or had a chance to. I worked on the helicopter and checked the bullet holes. Just minor damage. We were then ordered to do a reconnaissance patrol alone along Highway 13 to near the Cambodian border. We loaded 6 new guys into the helicopter that were going to Loc Ninh, probably the worst place to be stationed in Vietnam. I never heard of any guy who was stationed there that wasn't killed or wounded before his time was up. The new guys had brand new jungle fatigues and boots and they looked scared. They must have already got the word about Loc Ninh. They were replacements for the dead and wounded in Loc Ninh. I and my AC were tearing up looking at these poor guys. I actually started crying a lot. I guess I was letting loose after all the stuff I had seen, and now these innocent young kids were heading to almost certain annihilation of some sort. So very sad. We flew along Route 13 doing our What's Happening recon. We started out at low level, but then started to fly at probably 2,000 feet. At low level, sometimes a helicopter will surprise people in the open. But is it worth it? Not in our case. We were one helicopter, and if we were shot down, none of us on board would probably even make it to Loc Ninh. Help for us would probably never reach us in time, even if we survived the shoot-down. Our dangerous night mission was turning into a dangerous day mission. Route 13 went from Saigon to the Cambodian border and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The perfect infiltration route for the NVAVC, and they were everywhere near the route. In order to win the war, the North Vietnamese knew they had to take over the South Vietnamese capital of Saigon. There was a tremendous system of tunnels leading from the Ho Chi Minh Trail at the Cambodian border right to Saigon along this area. And our Cu Chi base camp was built right on top of the tunnel system, as we found out after the war ended. There was no way that we could control this vast area of enemy-controlled territory. Every foray into this area led to huge American and Allied casualties. American airstrikes and artillery strikes did kill NVAVC in this area, but every day the enemy grew stronger and they were well supplied. We made it to Loc Ninh and dropped off the poor guys who got a bad deal being ordered there. The whole area in and around the Loc Ninh base was pockmarked by craters caused by enemy mortars and rockets. We lifted off after wishing the new guys luck and headed to about the 2,000-foot elevation level. We were flying over Route 13 when we spotted about 300 troopers walking down the road at sling arms with bush hats on and red scarves around their necks. We figured they were ARVN troopers, as they were in the same kind of uniforms it seemed. And we have seen ARVNs wear the same kind of red scarves. We waved to them, and they waved back. Then they raised their rifles and started to shoot at us. My gunner and I started to shoot back as we flew very fast so as to distance ourselves from them. What a surprise that was. They were not hiding, but just walking down the road in formation. They may have done that a lot. Not many reconnaissance missions were done along Route 13 in early 1968, we figured. That is why we were ordered on one. The pilot tried to figure exactly where we were at and reported the sighting. The maps of this area were very bad at the time. We flew at dead reckoning mostly. Dead reckoning was identifying certain landmarks such as roads, canals, clumps of trees, villages, a big rock, or whatever in the daylight. We wondered if they were trying to look like ARVN troops to fool whoever. We reported that their appearance was similar to the ARVNs. There was mass disorganization of who was where at this time. Where are the friendly forces? Where are the enemy forces? Were constant questions. From what we saw, they had AK-47s, so that I would say identified them. Also, they shot at us. The NVAVC had no helicopters. We stayed at a high elevation on the way back to Cu Chi. We could recon and yet be mostly safe. Flying alone at treetop level in this area was not advisable at this time. We were nearing Cu Chi when a call went out in our area if a helicopter was available to pick up 2 wounded infantry fellows. At this time, the medevac helicopters were all shot down or busy somewhere else. We radioed that we would pick up the wounded but needed directions about where the location was. We received directions about where the casualties were and headed toward the area. The AC told them to pop a smoke in the area we were supposed to land when they heard our helicopter. We spotted a yellow smoke grenade. The AC asked what color. They said yellow. Then another yellow smoke grenade was spotted. The VC were monitoring our radio communications. We flew into the area of the first yellow smoke and spotted some infantry waving their hands and arms. We could see a clump of infantry and landed close to them as trees were in our way. We landed about 50 yards away. I waved to them to bring the wounded to the helicopter, but they waved to come to where they were. Very unusual. The AC told my gunner and I to go and get the wounded, as we were not in a secure area as gunfire was heard. My gunner and I ran out and got the first wounded fellow on the helicopter, and then ran back and carried the second wounded fellow to the helicopter, laid him on the floor, and then we jumped aboard and got the heck out of there. We received fire coming back out, and my gunner and I returned fire. Geez, everyone in the NVAVC ranks liked shooting at helicopters. It was their favorite pastime. I have to admit, we made a beautiful target.